What happens when we stop managing appearances outside and start showing up as real in our work, in our leadership, and in our lives? What do you think about that, Bruno?
I spent years, a bit like you said, acting like a chameleon. In big companies, you quickly learn how to read the room and behave the way people expect from you. You retain your questions, or so that you don't look naive, or you soften the strong opinions so that you don't upset people, and you smooth the edges. And that skill brought trust and promotions, let's be honest. But it also meant I left parts of myself outside the room. I was trying so hard to fit that I disappeared. As simple as that. I was not lying, but I was changing myself all the time. And these days, when I say masking, I mean those times when you let situation decide who you are. Masks, they're not bad. They're not bad per se. They help us to survive in a new environment. But if you wear them all the time, they become an habit, and you lose your own voice.
So please, grab a cup of coffee or tea, get comfortable, and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Brilliantly Branded podcast.
Hello, and welcome one more time to the Brilliantly Branded podcast. Remember that this is the space where we talk about the human side of branding. And why? Because behind every professional image, there is a person having a conversation about expectations, identity, and this tension between who we are and who we think we need to be. And this is what we are going to do today with my guest. We call our episode for today The Art of Masking to Fit. That already sounds very interesting. So how we adapt, how we perform and align so well with what the people are expected from us, that we start to really fade in our own story. So if normally looks like success, very polished, respected, even admired, but sometimes that success carries a cost, and a very high cost, the loss of authenticity, the loss of your energy, and the loss of the connection that if you have been part of this podcast audience, you will recognize that they are components of how we build our own authentic brand. So I have to say welcome to my guest today, Bruno Wozniak. He is a digital innovation consultant, and he is helping organizations bring the clarity to these complexity topics by translating ideas into impact. But behind that expertise, there is a more human story about the courage to stop performing and start leading from authenticity. So my question here, and to start this conversation, Bruno, what's happened when we stop managing appearances outside and start showing up as real in our work, in our leadership, and in our lives? What do you think about that, Bruno?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, Maria. And reflecting and looking back, I see that I spent years, a bit like you said, acting like a chameleon. In big companies, you quickly learn how to read the room and behave the way people expect from you. You retain your questions, or so that you don't look naive, or you soften the strong opinions so that you don't upset people, and you smooth the edges. And I got very good at that. I could spend the morning talking coding with engineers, and the afternoon laying out a strategy to an exco. And that skill brought trust and promotions, let's be honest. But it also meant I left parts of myself outside the room. The word masking entered my vocabulary very recently, in fact. It's when I started teaching very recently. And I took a course on neurodiversity because I had a student that was on the spectrum, and I failed to understand how to best communicate with that person. So I took a course on neurodiversity, and I was explaining how different minds process information and learn how people sometimes hide parts of themselves to fit in. And it hit me, in fact. I had a haha moment. That's what I'd been doing all along. It wasn't faking. I was trying so hard to fit that I disappeared, as simple as that. I was not lying, but I was changing myself all the time. And these days, when I say masking, I mean those times when you let situation decide who you are. Masks, they're not bad. They're not bad per se. They help us to survive in the new environment. But if you wear them all the time, they become an habit and you lose your own voice. So now I still adjust. I have not solved that problem all along. I still do it, but I do it. I choose when I do it. Sometimes I will turn down my energy if the room is a bit anxious. Other times I will let my enthusiasm show and flow. But the difference is that I control and I decide when I want to wear the mask or when I don't.
Wow, that is very revealing, because personally I believe that it's very difficult to control that. When you should wearing the mask if you want to fit, and when you should be moving that mask and appear as the authentic self that you are. And the problem is that we don't know how to identify that moment. So, in this part of your experience, what do you think that the people, or from your personal story starting, what was this moment on your story that make you realize, I have been disappearing behind the mask that I call it recently the onion layers. The onion layers is all the things that we are putting on top of us to try to hide, as you well explained, to try to put it just at the name of a position that we are doing, or putting ourselves even in boxes to make people identify who we are. But when did you realize that that happened to you?
Yeah, that's so again a fascinating question, and Maria, and you might be disappointed. There was not a point in time when I said, "Oh, this is a mask. I remove it. I'm done." It didn't happen that way. There was not a single moment. I was like more realizing over time that something was missing through the corporate career. There was often moment in time where I left the room or the meeting confident, competent, but strangely low on energy, a bit flat. For example, in a boardroom presentation, it was hard to feel energized and excited. The trigger was when I left the corporate world and I started to run projects on my own. And I felt a huge difference. So just to give you an example, a small story. One day I was running a design sprint for a client, and the room came alive. People were laughing, arguing, they were building on top of each other's idea. And when it was over, nobody wanted to leave the room. They wanted to carry on, etc. And I walked away thinking and feeling like I got plugged with that room and the energy was feeding me. And it's probably at that point that I thought, why have I never felt, the same way after a budget meeting, for example? So the thing is, masking felt safe, but it took away my excitement. And that contrast, it showed me what constant adaptation had cost me. I didn't burn out, but it was a slow wearing down of my curiosity and even joy. You see what I mean? With time, it's a bit like drops of water on a stone. One drop will not change the stone. 2 drops won't. Three drops won't. But with time, over and over again, the stone is going to start changing shape. So it's a bit like that. So it's really over time. And so fitting so well and for so long, that's what took a toll on me, on my energy and my enthusiasm. You could say I muted the parts of myself that bring energy. So stepping away from environments that promotes this smoothness and, nice fitting face, etc. Once I tasted that feeling, I didn't want to go back. So the day I realized that, hey, I can, if I am myself and I feel that energy and that joy and that enthusiasm, I said, I don't want to go back to the previous situation. So the lesson is simple. Fitting in feels secure, but it can drain the life out of your work. And in fact, our most creative and satisfying moments, they often live at the edge of comfort, where you let yourself, express, and your true energy can show. So that's my experience. It was not an overnight moment, Maria. It was really over time realizing.
Yes.
And I'm there today.
I can imagine, because actually is the illusion of belonging. You mentioned how you think that you are performing very well, that you can looks like you belong there because you are really looking like you are having a nice time, all the things, but that end up paying a high cost behind that, because that is removing your authenticity from you. I mean, this is part of what you just explained, that is removing that. And when you recover that energy of this authenticity, because this energy spike, right? On your case, this energy spike when the authenticity shows up. So can you describe this moment? Because I think it's a lot of people that maybe are thinking, I'm feeling well when I am in the budget meeting, for example, but then when they have another kind of moment in which they are identified that they have this authenticity, more feeling like you are there because the way that you are, you will love to be as well. When things start to feel real again for them, for example.
Yeah. Again, it's going deep into my story. So my teaching experience, I tried to control everything. I would plan each exercise down to, all the details. Every minute was perfectly planned. And then one day I decided to let it go a little bit, and there was a day, it was my second or third training, I can't remember exactly, but there was a student, she was very quiet, and suddenly she connected what we discussed and what we were building in the training to her own work. And she shared it with the group. And, everybody in the room was reacting to what she was saying. And at some point I said, oh, wow, I'm not in control anymore. But in fact, that's a point in time where I was shifting from trying to be a teacher or to act as a teacher to really being one. And in fact, learning with the students, but still guiding the learning process. So I had created that image of a teacher where smartest person in the room, guiding from beginning to end, etc. But the real learning was when the student connected with each other, and I was part of the experience, so to speak. When you drop the mask, the energy doesn't come from forcing yourself, because I was telling you that I was planning everything in the course, still showing with high energy, because I thought that's what I had to do in the room. But when there was this shift, I still had that high level of energy, but it was not forced. It was, it was natural. It was just flowing. I was fitting with the moment, so to speak. So the class, all the classes afterwards, when I had this realization moment, it became lighter and more interactive. And actually, in fact, in my consulting, I also stopped pretending to have all the answers. And I also invited my clients to solve the problems together. And in fact, so I started to say, I don't know, let's discover together. Wow, a big risk, showing as the person who doesn't have the answer. Wow, a big risk. And the thing is, then the people started to trust me more, because I was not pretending. I was not pretending that I had all the answers. And they were much more open to sharing their ideas that they would not have dared to share if I would have said, hey, this is how it works, etc. So by showing up as I really am, and showing also, okay, look, I don't have all the answers, I in fact created more trust than showing with the know-it-all type of person. So that's that's two situations where, to me, it became obvious what happens when you manage to reach that authenticity in the leadership style.
Yeah, that connecting with a little bit with what happened, especially when you are working as a leader and when you are a facilitator of a process, in the case that you are working with your clients or teaching, actually removing that mask. Because as we said, well, this is the person that needs to know absolutely everything. One of the things that resound with me is this kind of feeling identified with the person that is leading and with is teaching you, that is recognizing that, I don't have all the answers. Let me get it into that and research it more about that. For me, as you well said, that generates even more trust. And that is actually connected with something, a big word that is called vulnerability. And vulnerability for me is magnetic. Is what happened when you use your vulnerability to communicate and not just to inform, because communication, people put it into the box of communications, but sometimes communication, if you are not having the two people involved without the two sides, that become information, right? I would love you to tell us an example or something that will people understand a little bit more when you use that, when you use those vulnerability in the terms of, you already gave us one example when you say, I don't know all the things, but how to remove the fear, because it's a very thin line when you say, well, I'm going to say that I don't know, but how really that is going to bring you consequences? How you will recommend to manage that moment?
Yeah, so I have a couple of examples, Maria, and I remember. So I think a big learning moment in terms of vulnerability was a moment of complete chaos. So I was running a workshop, and everything that you could imagine went wrong. The equipment failed, we were behind schedule, and everyone in the room was tense. In fact, the old version of me would have said, I would try to salvage the situation. I would try to, put my hurt and soul into getting back on track. And instead, at that point, I paused and I said, okay, girls and guys, this is messy. And in fact, that's what real creativity looks like. So the people in the room started to laugh. The tension dissolved. We stopped worrying about the agenda and we started building together. And that experience was a big learning for me. It taught me that when things aren't perfect doesn't make you look bad. It makes you relatable and it opens door to collaboration. And since then, I've tried to be open about what I know and what I don't. And I share, unfinished thoughts to encourage others to do the same. And with clients, I'm honest about uncertainties and I invite them to explore solution with me. 1+1 equals more, or is greater than 2. And people stop trying to look smart and start actually thinking together, because they know that I'm not coming with everything and they have their space to contribute as well. And it's the togetherness that will, make a difference. So vulnerability is not about telling your life story or your weaknesses. It's about being honest in the moment and showing that imperfection is normal. When you do that, you give others the permission to be honest too. So not a weakness, but it's the fastest way to connect, quite frankly.
That will include as well the word being adapted easily to the environment, or how you will describe that, because sometimes we are thinking, I should be just stay true to who I am, or should I really be adaptable and acting in a different way to solve this problem? So how you will define this balance that we need to keep between adapting and staying true to who we are?
Yeah, I still adjust today. Like I said, it's not, hey, that was the old me and that's the new me and there's no mask anymore. So I still do adjust to my audience. Every meeting has a different speed and a different mood. So I listen to that and I change my tone on to maximize the connection with people. But like I said, the big difference is the intentionality. I choose when I do it, decide. So I don't let the room decide who I am, but I decide who I am depending on how I feel the room and if it still fits with who I believe I am. So it's like you can change the tension of the string to change the sound a little bit, but you will not change your guitar into a violin, for example. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
masking is okay. You take a different role, so you're gonna change your guitar into a violin, whereas using the mask intentionally is more, playing with the strings to have a different tone. That's the nuance or the analogy I'm using.
I like this analogy because actually that explain clearly what is our brand about. So
Yeah.
in the analogy, the guitar is a guitar, the violin is a violin, and for change some things and be adaptable, you are not going to start to be a violin. So I really love that
Yeah,
analogy.
that's
It's,
it.
it's very clear. It's very
Yeah.
clear, Bruno. And one of the things that I will love the listeners take out of this podcast is something you told me that I can reveal this secret here in the podcast. And if you, again, I just want to confirm, are you authorizing me to deliver this content or not? What
Yeah,
I
no,
am going to
absolutely.
say.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
completely, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I am so happy to announce that Bruno is launching his own book. So he become an author, and I will love you to tell us what this book is about, what the people can take away, and how the people can get from that book the best of what you wanted to put it there. So please, Bruno.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. It's a deep experience. So, I'm a bit emotional talking about it. And this book, in fact, came quite, it came together quite quickly. It was a few days of very intense and deep work. And the story is after I left my last corporate role. So I found myself staring at a blank schedule. So it felt good. It felt liberating, but also scary. And to understand that feeling, I started to journal, every day. What do I feel? How does it look like? Positive, negative. I started to write notes, and I'm an engineer by trade. So I started to find patterns and to find frameworks and things that work, things that don't work. And before I knew it, I had a stack of notes and I said, oh, wow. In fact, I didn't decide myself alone. And people said, oh, you should write a book. I said, oh, come on, cannot do that. And then I guess I had a tipping point where I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. So in a few weeks, took those notes, wrote the book, and here we go. It's called the Reinvention Playbook. And the subtitle is Rebuilding Identity, Direction, and Confidence After the Job Ends.
Wow.
So it's not a memoir or a shiny self-help guide, but it's a practical companion for people who they have left their job, or they have lost their job, or they have quit their job because they could not take it anymore. So it's built on my own experience, but at the same time also conversations with others who have reinvented themselves. So the book is a bunch. So it's where you start with, okay, I don't have a job anymore, so what's left? And then rebuilding your identity, not rushing into making a new resume, candidating to a bunch of jobs, and in fact, repeat what we've just experienced. But in fact, start from within. What's left when the role is gone, and rebuild from the inside out. And that was a very revelating experience. And I'm super excited I feel a bit vulnerable, Maria, to be frank, because it's a first time, obviously, but it was a gorgeous experience, to reflect on myself, rebuild my own identity, and share it with the world.
Well, I have to say congratulations, Bruno, because you are giving a gift to the world, and everybody can read about your experience, and having a story behind, and be vulnerable to tell your story, to share what happened to you, and to share what are the tools and the lessons that you have learned, to share that with the world, you are already adding value and making changes. So congratulations. I'm so happy to have this. I am the first that I am announcing that. I'm very happy about that. I'm
Yeah, it's the
supporting
first one.
you, and it's very nice to know that there is a lot of people doing good things as well to help between us, because I believe in the power of growing together. And that's why when we have this conversation for you to come to the podcast, I felt this identification in the things that I am doing as well, to let the people know how they from our pain, because my pain was arriving to a continent, because actually I'm coming from the other side of the world, in the sense that how do you arrive to a continent and then you don't know how to reinvent, if this is the right word, to recreate yourself, because I have been recreating myself many times. So I'm very happy to see that you are sharing your story, not only the story, but giving tools. So I'm really looking forward to have this book on my hands, to give the read, and to continue spreading the voice and supporting you in your journey to giving this knowledge outside to the world. Thank you, Bruno, for that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, well, great. I think that we are arriving already to the end of our episode. I think it's very important to keep in mind that we don't need to wear this mask. As our purpose in this episode, it was talking about how we remove the mask. I think that you are a witness of how you remove your mask, become yourself, and that increase your energy. So my invitation, of course, in terms of empowerment, how we empower ourselves, but being who we really, our true selves. So I don't know if you wanted to add something else, Bruno, that you found relevant that we haven't talked about in this episode.
No, so my final thought, Maria, is if we were to summarize the whole conversation in 20 seconds, I would say, hey, look, you can build a career by fitting in and by masking. That's totally possible. But the real impact comes from just being yourself. And before you can be yourself, there's a process to discover who you are. And I think I did quite a bit of journey there in the last few months. So yeah, super happy to have discovered that and to share it with you and with your audience and with the world. Yeah, that's my final word.
Thank you, Bruno. I am going to share the links to connect it with you. I think people are going to find as well very valuable to have a conversation with you and go deeper into this topic. Thank you, Bruno, very much for being here in the Brilliantly Branded podcast.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Maria. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you, Bruno.
I'm grateful by having you as a listener on this episode. I am in the mission of empowering thousands of women around the globe, and I need your support for that. Help me to spread the voice by sharing this episode and subscribe to our social media channels. And remember, if you want to listen to exceptional stories and have someone that inspires you, please get in touch with me, because I will love to have them as a guest to learn from their experience and share their story with you next time. So until the next episode, ciao, ciao.